When I was at my lowest, they gave me a warm welcome and made me feel at home. After a relatively brief time in the congregation, and I think many of us can understand that feeling, that it's not long before you walk through those doors for the first time that somebody's roping you in to do something within the congregation. But I found that, yes, I was being asked to participate, and I found not only personal support, but a path to creating meaningful connections in my life. And this was not just from the deep and insightful Sunday services and spiritual programming, but it was also from getting involved with the outreach work the church was doing in the local area. The community had a strong sense of purpose, and so therefore, so did I. Fast forward several years later, and I'm newly arrived in the UK without any local connections apart from my husband and his network. So again, my first port of call was my local Unitarian church, which happened to be New Unity in Northeast London. Once again, I found a soft place to land and was warmly welcomed. And in the blink of an eye, I was volunteering for newsletter duty and getting on community committees. And soon after that, I was part of the teams that helped breathe life into Fuse, the Festival of Unitarians in the Southeast, which is still an ongoing project, and Simple Gifts, the Unitarian Social Action Project in Bethnal Green, East London. It's very satisfying to know that important work continues at Simple Gifts, and personally, the legacy of my time there is now being borne out in my role as Social Action Officer. It is clear to me that social justice is at the heart of our Unitarian faith. And although I would never claim to me that it's perhaps the most important part of my faith, it's certainly deeply connected to the way I view my spiritual life. How we engage with the world, the actions we take to spread love, compassion, and inclusivity, from the smallest personal interactions to the largest coordinated effort, these all speak to our Unitarian values. In my first year in this post, I've heard from Unitarians around the UK about how relatively small I have 1 second, I just double-clicked and made it too big. I'm so sorry. There we go. I've heard about how relatively small outreach projects have helped congregations make deeper connections to their local areas. And sometimes this translates to bums on seats, but it's offered the deeper connection with the congregation itself that is the main reward, and it's an important one. When we show the world that we are a faith that welcomes all, that strives for kindness and compassion, that we offer a supportive shoulder during a crisis, and also inspiration for spiritual growth when there is that desire, these are the kind of engagements and connections that make our communities stronger, more relevant, and worth preserving and nurturing for further growth. There's a significant amount of global angst and ennui currently right now, given all we've been through in recent years and are still experiencing, the climate crisis, the war in Ukraine, economic hardship, the threatened collapse of the NHS, the collective anxiety with the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, etc. It can all feel more than overwhelming. And there are certainly days when it is a real struggle to peel back the covers and face the day. But this is when our community can show its strength, to support those in need, to give a voice to the marginalized, and to offer a space for the exploration of new ideas, new ways of being. We have the opportunity to be the change that we want to see, and we now need to connect with each other and do what we can to relieve suffering and spread love and compassion. And this is what I will be fostering during the rest of my 5-year mandate at the GA. I'll bring all things being equal. When looking for inspiration for deepening our faith through social action, the heavy-hitting historical figures are where my brain first goes to. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King. Their dedication to righteousness and compassion is easy to witness, and their sacrifices evident to all, despite all three of them being complicated figures, and perhaps because of that. But then there are the medium famous martyrs, those who made sacrifices for the greater good and are well known in certain circles, if not quite as prominent. I think of Reverend James Reeb, the Unitarian minister who was beaten to death while on a civil rights march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama in 1965. Reverend Reeb lived out his values not only in his day-to-day life, but not only by sacrificing his own life in the name of equality and justice, but also in the way he lived his day-to-day life. He served inner-city Black communities in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Boston, and moved his wife and 4 children into the heart of the neighborhoods he served, knowing that he could not make a difference for Black families while comfortably living in a white suburb. And then we have someone closer to home like Dr. Alfred Salter, a physician working near the docks of London around the turn of the century, who, inspired by his wife Ada, herself a social reformer, environmentalist, and pacifist, had radical ideas about housing and healthcare for the poor. He garnered support from other like-minded physicians and set up mutual medical insurance schemes for East End dock workers and their families, as well as education programs to help them combat hygiene-related illnesses. Like Reverend Reeb after him, Dr. Salter insisted on keeping his family in amongst the communities they were serving in the turn-of-the-century Bermondsey. His passion came at a high price. The squalid housing conditions that surrounded the family's home caused Dr. Salter's daughter to contract scarlet fever, which took her life at the age of 7. Despite this, he carried on working tirelessly, not only in medicine, but in government, serving as local councillor and later an MP. And in more recent years, we have Greta Thunberg and Malala Yousafzai, young women who have made serious personal sacrifices to stand up against injustice. Their continued presence in the arenas of women's rights and climate justice show us the capacity for leadership in the younger generations. And after we consider these well-known and public examples, we come to the everyday examples of kindness, compassion, and sacrifice that we can all be on the watch for. The smile from a stranger, someone relinquishing a precious seat in the bus, a quid in a hat laid in front of a panhandler. If we leave our house, most of us will be witness to dozens of small acts of kindness every day. We could even be alert for online kindness or compassion with our own households if we stay close to home. And our very witness of these acts magnifies their impact and feeds our soul little by little. And this is certainly one way that we can live our faith every day. Beyond that, there are deeper personal social actions going on all the time that we may not be aware of. In the way that people show up to give their time, to volunteer with a project or comfort a friend, despite their own crippling social anxiety or grief or physical tiredness. These invisible personal victories that require a huge amount of fortitude may be taken for granted by the outside world. Be on the lookout for these heroes among us and let their sacrifices create a ripple of goodwill. And as well, and perhaps most importantly, be on the lookout for this behavior in yourself. Be aware when you do great little deeds that require you to temporarily ignore or manage your internal burdens. And understand also that maybe we can't do that every time. Maybe there are some days when we're just too wrung out, too emotionally or physically exhausted to raise our head above the parapet. Days when self-care is more necessary than anything else, and we need to look after ourselves before we can gather strength for future endeavors. But whenever we find ourselves with just enough physical and emotional energy to pick ourselves up and serve others, you never know who it is you may be inspiring. With that very action, no matter how small, you are doing your best to build paradise on earth, to quote Reverend Stephen Lingwood. And at the very least, you are paying into your own spiritual bank, which you can draw from when you feel depleted. And these are also useful lessons to consider at the congregational level. When a congregation is strong, connected, and has full mutual support, there can be a deep well of energy and ideas to serve the local community and support social causes that align with its values. New projects may spring up and collaboration with other groups may come easily. And this is when we pay into our collective spiritual bank. But there will be other times when just opening up on a Sunday is about all the collective energy the congregation can muster. When the management committee is stretched thin, when younger members are occupied by childcare duties, when illness or family concerns keep members away. One might say it's then, when we are just opening our doors, when we keep on opening our doors no matter what, that the real work is being done. At that point, we are conserving our energy, but also nourishing and supporting each other. And just by opening these doors, we are making ourselves available for interaction with the outside world. In Lewisham, where I'm the chair of the committee, this very phenomenon has come to pass more than once. Just before I joined the community in 2013, the congregation had winnowed down to a handful of longtime members. There was talk of closing. Those remained, however, wanted to ensure they left a legacy in the area. So as a last act of the congregation, they registered the premises for same-sex weddings, the first church in the borough to do so. They sent out a press release, and it was picked up by the local press. And within a month or so, they had a few people walking through the door on a Sunday to find out about this LGBTQ plus friendly congregation with its gay minister. And after a year, the community had a real sense of rebounding. And not just from people within the queer community, but also people who saw there was a liberal space for spiritual seekers on their doorstep. Small act, significant ripples. I've also seen this phenomenon acted out in my own life. Last year was incredibly difficult for my family. My father was struggling with rather severe health issues, and then my mother passed away quite suddenly. My husband and I had been poised to move back to the US to support my parents, but the situation changed overnight, and I was left grieving on several levels. After a few months, I was still emotionally wrung out, but trying to rejoin life more fully. And an opportunity came up for us to host a Ukrainian refugee, and my Unitarian values kicked in. Even though I was still pretty raw, I felt like we couldn't say no. We had a spare room, we had no other housemates. It was the perfect setup for somebody needing a stable home after fleeing from warfare. So Irina came to live with us, and that was last October. She's been here for over a year now, and she's part of the family. When I felt like I had nothing left to give, bringing Irina into our home enriched our lives beyond measure and filled a small part of the hole left by my mother, and now my father, who also has since left life, as Irina says, which I think is a really interesting phrase. Sometimes the foreign languages offer more poetic expressions of death. But her presence in our home reminds us what we can do, doing what we can do to relieve suffering is the most human thing that we can do. And so I leave it to you to be on the lookout for opportunities to connect with those who are struggling, who are in need of care and compassion, and reach out a hand of loving kindness. Challenge yourselves to go a little bit extra, to dig a little deeper, to act with tolerance when you are faced with anger and injustice, but also recognize when the person in need of love and compassion is yourself. Thank you. Before our final hymn, I do have another reading, since we have time, that I'd like to share with you. This is adapted by Dana Lee Simon, an American Unitarian and civil rights activist. My peony didn't bloom this year. She came up nice and green, tall too, but there were no buds. Nothing that was going to unfurl into her gorgeous fuchsia flowers, so big and beautiful that they always bend her to the ground. I was sad at first. I found myself giving her extra water, encouraging her in my mind. Come on, bloom, baby, bloom. Then a little exasperation snuck in. Come on, flowering's the whole point, isn't it? And next, compassion. Yes, compassion for a plant. It's okay if you don't bloom this year. Take a break. I don't think you got enough water last summer. My guess there's a lot going on at the root level that I can't see, but you know about that. And finally, love, shown by long drinks of water beyond what our sprinkling system gives, offered through a simple honoring of her enoughness in her green beauty. I'm so happy that you were here at all. Along my journey of life, self-compassion is one of the best gifts I give myself. It allows me to receive the help and support I need when presented with grief or hardship, helping me soften and allow a new normal. I know that my own practices of self-compassion help me to find compassion for my peony. And the compassion I found for it has served to renew the self-compassion I offer myself as I continue to go through my own summer growing season. Now the love flows to myself, to my peony, and out beyond my own backyard too, just as it's designed to do. My peony didn't bloom this year, and she's okay. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace, seeking justice. I mean go in peace, committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace.